If you told me when I was 15 that I'd one day get to drive a Mazda RX7, Honda NSX, and Toyota Supra back to back on a twisty canyon road, I would have said you're lying, and yet here we are.
I know, we're missing the Nissan R32 GTR, but let's just celebrate the fact that we even have these three JDM legends on camera today.
Besides the fact that all three are Japanese, built in the 1990s, and send power to the rear wheels, these cars couldn't be more different. The Supra is quite a bit burlier than the others, with a curb weight near 3,500 pounds and focused on monstrous straight-line performance from its 3-liter turbocharged straight six. The RX7 is a lightweight here at 2,800 pounds, boasting near 50-50 weight distribution and a glorious spinning Dorito under the hood. The NSX is the only car here with its engine, a 3-liter V6, mounted behind the driver. In terms of weight, it splits the difference between the other two and is perhaps the most exotic of the three.
But these three cars represent more than their paper specs would suggest. They defined an entire generation of car enthusiasts, and today we have the very special opportunity to experience these three cars, the RX-7, the NSX, and the Supra, back to back, and see exactly what makes them so special. I think it's time we go for a drive. So this particular FD RX-7 Spirit R clone has been modified by its owner Taylor to produce a relatively modest 267 rear wheel horsepower. Now, before you cry foul for including an RX-7 that is so severely underpowered compared to the NSX and Supra, well, just don't, because let me tell you, the RX-7 simply does not need more than 300 horsepower. Sure, it would add some drama, but to be honest, this car is all about balance. That's its forte, and that's what we're going to find out when we start pushing it a little bit in the corners here. So that's one advantage of this 13B rotary engine. It's small, it's very light, and it absolutely loves to rev, which perfectly matches the nimble driving dynamics of this chassis. With double wishbones front and rear and the shortest wheelbase of the three cars today, this RX-7 simply loves to turn. It turns in much more quickly than the Supra or the NSX. And with close to 300 horsepower at the crank, the power to weight ratio of this car is still pretty comparable to modern sports cars. So Taylor has equipped this car with Öhlins coilovers, BBS wheels, and a Spirit R-inspired interior. And to be honest, I think this car might be the best looking of the three we have today. You won't find a big GT wing or wide body kit or a crazy negative camber on this car. It really does stay true to its 90s heritage in terms of styling. But this car still represents a pure and visceral driving experience, and yet it's, in my opinion, the most approachable of the three.
In short, it's a car that only could have existed in the 1990s. With today's emissions and pedestrian crash safety regulations, a turbocharged rotary-powered shrink-wrap torpedo like the FD would simply never make it to production. And even with all its quirks and reliability issues, the car has a cult-like following, and for good reason.
Although the original NSX left the factory in Tochigi, Japan with a naturally aspirated 3-liter V6, Jami, the owner of this car, has modified it with a Comtech supercharger pushing around 420 horsepower at the crank, or around 370 wheel horsepower at 8 psi of boost. The car also features an AM Infinity ECU, KW V3 coilovers, raised wheels, and a host of other powertrain, chassis, suspension, and brake upgrades to make this car pretty much perform on par with any modern sports car. This car is an absolute weapon, whether you're in the canyons or on the racetrack. I mean, just look at it. The wide body kit, the Voltex GT wing, the StopTech big brake kit, the raised wheels. I mean, I'm really tempted to call this car the Batmobile from now on. Now, since I do own a completely stock 91 NSX, and this is essentially identical as a 92 model, I am pretty familiar driving this car. But the love it or hate it 90s features of my stock NSX, like the floaty suspension, the tiny wheels and tires, and the small brakes, have been completely revamped in this car. I mean, this car is really at a modern level of performance now. With over 50% more power than stock, a lot more mechanical grip, and a tightened down chassis and suspension, this NSX would really put up a great fight against your modern Porsche Cayman S's of the world. With its V6 mounted right behind the driver and pushing down on that rear axle, this car really shines coming out of corners. As long as the driver knows to basically feed the throttle in, stay on the throttle exiting the corner, and not lift abruptly, the car will stay planted and composed all the way through the corner, which is a common handling trait of mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars. Oh, so much grip.
Engineered by Honda, perfected by Ayrton Senna, and customized by its owner Jami, this NSX represents the absolute pinnacle of tuner Hondas. A generation that grew up in the 90s and 2000s modifying Civics and Integras to outrun V8-powered domestic cars, whether at the red light or on the racetrack. Many of those people have graduated to the NSX, the ultimate Honda. Or, if you purchased an NSX when it was new, you'll probably remember how it turned the supercar world upside down and forced the likes of Ferrari, Porsche, and Lamborghini to level up. You'll rarely run into an NSX owner who isn't planning to keep his or her car forever, and it's easy to see why.
The Mark IV Toyota Supra absolutely needs no introduction. It is easily the most iconic tuner car of all time, in my opinion, made famous by Fast and Furious, Initial D, and other shows. And honestly, it's very simple why. Back during a time when Toyota over-engineered their cars, they created this cast iron block, twin turbocharged, 3-liter inline 6, known as a 2JZ, and the rest is history. This particular Supra is owned by a gentleman named Mo, and he's nicknamed it the Smurf, or I guess people have seen it have nicknamed it the Smurf due to its paint job. Mo has converted the stock sequential turbo setup to a single turbo setup, and even on stock internals with E85, this car is pushing 715 wheel horsepower, about 3 times stock. I think you know what's about to happen next. The Toyota Supra was never designed to be a pure sports car. If you want a handler, get an RX7 or get an NSX. But on the other hand, if you want to show that Dodge Hellcat a pair of taillights and a fire-spitting single exhaust on your next trip to the drag strip, this is the car for you. The Supra is cheap to build, difficult to break, and represents one of the easiest and most reliable ways to go really, really stupidly fast. But unlike the fastest cars of today, the Supra still requires a skillful driver to get the most out of it. You won't find any fancy dual clutch transmissions or launch control here. All you get is a 6-speed manual transmission, 3 pedals, and it's up to you, the driver, to perfectly balance the turbo lag, the throttle input, the clutch input, and get a perfect launch off the line. Get it wrong and you'll bog, or you'll just do a burnout and go nowhere. But when you do get it right, it is oh so rewarding.
Despite their differences, these 3 sports cars from Toyota, Mazda, and Honda represent the absolute pinnacle of Japanese automotive engineering in the 90s.
They were extraordinarily unique in their time, pushing the boundaries of performance, driving pleasure, and usability, and essentially rewrote the Western world's perception of Japanese cars as lifeless econoboxes. I grew up lusting after all 3 of these cars, and I'm incredibly lucky to own my own NSX. I'm even luckier to have been able to experience multiple examples of all 3 of these cars, but the journey doesn't end here. There's an entire world full of cars, different manufacturers, different generations from different parts of the world, and I can't wait to capture it all on camera. But I will never forget the 3 cars that first ignited my passion.